take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation. Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Friday, February 13th, 2015, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Welcome to the weekend, everyone. So glad you can be here to join us. Getting ready for the Valentine's weekend, and it's going to be a good one for yours truly. Flying out to San Francisco tomorrow afternoon to take part in the International Cannabis Business Conference. You can check out more about that at internationalcbc.com. Got a big write-up in the Associated Press today. That was nice to see. Also, nice to be able to get there early. The conference doesn't start till Sunday, so I'm flying in Saturday, and I managed to score a ticket for my wife to fly out as well. All this flying around the country, I built up some frequent flyer miles, and so I was able to bring her out. We actually get to celebrate a Valentine's Day together in downtown San Francisco. You couldn't ask for a much better perk than that. So thank you everyone who helped support 420 Radio and the Russ Belville Show, making this all possible and getting the occasional benefit of at least a one-day vacation for my wife and I. So that's very, very nice. All right, on today's show, we have got all sorts of great information. I'm so excited to talk to our guest today at 1:30. We have Aaron Malin calling in from Show Me Cannabis in Missouri. And wow, talk about an effective activist organization. They're always making the news. John Payne leading that group out there, making great strides in marijuana activism in a conservative southern state that I believe will be the first state to go straight to legalization and bypass medical. We'll see, but if I had to pick one, that's the one I would pick. Aaron's joining us today to talk about some lawsuits that they have engaged in with the drug task forces there in Missouri, these multi-jurisdictional forces that don't believe they have to share any of their documentation or information according to the Sunshine Law. You know, most of these states have a open records law, sunshine law, transparency law, whatever it ends up being called. They're withholding some documentation and some data on how much of their time they spend busting people for marijuana. The cops say they shouldn't have to tell because it's all about criminal investigations. And Show Me Cannabis kind of says, well, that's the point. We're trying to do some investigation on your criminal investigations and how you're conducting them. So we'll talk to Aaron about that and get the lowdown on what's happening there in the Show Me state. Also on the show today, we'll have time for a radical rant. We're going to revisit a topic that I've ranted about before, and that is these states that are trying to pass drug testing for welfare. There are 12 states trying to implement piss testing for the poor. We're going to tell you about them, what results they've gotten so far, and why it's such a terrible idea to mandate drug testing for welfare benefits. Also on the show today, we're going to do some drug war data mining. I'm going to take you for a look around the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's database. They've been in the news this week because of their latest studies showing that marijuana consumers are no more likely to get into a crash than sober drivers. We'll take a look at some of the fatality statistics from the legal and non-legal states that sort of back that information up. Also on the show, in Behind the Headlines, we issue a tribute and our condolences to the family of Ralph Bronner from the Dr. Bronner Soap Company. He passed away on Tuesday. We're going to look back at his life and legacy. That all comes after the 420 radio news. In the news today, Oregon's governor has resigned. What does that mean for legalization? The Kettle Falls Five will have to stand trial. Maryland's still trying to legalize. The International Cannabis Business Conference starts Sunday in San Francisco. And the House of Representatives is passing fast-track legislation for scheduled pharmaceutical drugs. All that coming up on the Russ Belville Show. And then stay tuned for Hour 2, Toker Talk Radio. We'll take your calls at 971-533-7111 and discuss all the topics of the day. Hope you're having the start of a great weekend today. We're back right after this message.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, the home of marijuana experts. Oregon has joined Washington and Colorado in legalizing marijuana. We're Portland NORML, the national organization for the reform of marijuana laws chapter in Portland, Oregon. Join us as we celebrate the launch of an exciting new era in marijuana freedom in Oregon. Our job has just begun. Powerful interests want to white out the most important portions of Oregon's legalization law. By joining Portland NORML, you add your voice to the thousands who voted for Measure 91 and want it to be implemented as written. The people have spoken. Now it is time for the legislature to obey the will of the people. Find out more about Portland NORML at portlandnormal.org. Attend our monthly membership meetings on the fourth Saturday of the month. See our website for more details. Portland NORML, ensuring responsible adult marijuana consumers are afforded the same rights, privileges, and responsibilities as beer drinkers.
I like it like that.
Well, I don't know what you came to do, but what we came to keep the funk alive.
That's right, baby. We're keeping the funk alive right here at Big Daddy Fink's Funky Roller Ring, your groovy home of soul, funk, and disco. So join me, Big Daddy, every Thursday night at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific at the Funky Roller Ring, where every night is Saturday night.
This is Radical Russ encouraging you to take a look at the Weed Blog every day. Johnny Green and the staff at the Weed Blog are on top of all the latest developments in the fight to end marijuana prohibition nationwide. You can even get the Weed Blog on your smartphone by installing the Weed Blog app for iPhone and Android. If it's about weed, it's on the Weed Blog, including my original writing. So don't delay. Read the Weed Blog today. It's time for the 420 Radio News, covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Transcripts of 420 Radio News are available daily on our website at 420radio.org. Now, here's Russ Belville with your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds.
This is your 420 Radio News for Friday, February 13th, 2015. Following weeks of controversy over his fiance's alleged influence peddling, Oregon Governor John Kitzhaber resigned from his historic fourth term today. Taking the governor's office until the 2016 election is Secretary of State Kate Brown. Considering what this means for Oregon's rulemaking process for soon-to-be legal marijuana, Measure 91 Chief Petitioner Anthony Johnson explained, quote, "We can expect Kate Brown to be more sensible on marijuana law issues than resigning Governor John Kitzhaber. Not only did Governor Kitzhaber oppose Measure 91 and immediately call for changes that would override the will of over 56% of the voters, such as moving the medical marijuana program under the Oregon Liquor Control Commission and decreasing the home possession limits allowed under Measure 91, but he also signed the recriminalization of 1 ounce of marijuana into law in 1997. And fortunately, Oregon voters wisely overrode his bad judgment." End quote. A judge in Washington state has ruled a measure approved by Congress to end federal prosecutions of medical marijuana patients does not benefit 4 family members and a friend who say they grew the drug for medicinal purposes. The defendants were arrested in August 2012, months before Washington residents voted to legalize marijuana for recreational use, for tending a garden that roughly complied with the state's medical pot law passed in 1998. In May, the House of Representatives passed an amendment forbidding federal funds from being used to prosecute state legal marijuana patients, which President Barack Obama signed into law in December. Defense attorneys for the Kettle Falls Five attempted to persuade Judge Rice, an Obama appointee who worked for more than 2 decades as a prosecutor in the office pursuing the case, that he should dismiss charges in light of the spending prohibition. Judge Rice disagreed, citing the specific parameters of state law, dashing the Kettle Falls Five best hope for the quick end to that case. State legislators aren't giving up the fight to legalize recreational marijuana in Maryland. Delegate Kurt Anderson and Senator Jamie Raskin introduced companion bills in the House and Senate aimed at taxing and regulating marijuana similarly to alcohol. The Maryland Control and Revenue Act of 2015 would allow adults 21 and older to possess up to 1 ounce of marijuana and grow up to 6 plants in their homes. The legislators sponsored similar legislation last year, but the bills failed to pass. The fiscal note on last year's bill indicated legalizing recreational marijuana could generate more than $95 million from a $50 per ounce excise tax and about $39 million from state sales tax. Possessing less than 10 grams of marijuana in Maryland is a civil offense that carries a fine of up to $100 for the first offense, $250 for the second offense, and as much as $500 for subsequent offenses. Marijuana legalization proponents are gathering in San Francisco this weekend to hear about efforts to legalize marijuana in California. The International Cannabis Business Conference on Sunday and Monday is expected to draw about 1,000 investors, entrepreneurs, and activists from California and elsewhere for an overview of the legalization landscape. Advocacy groups are now drafting a 2016 ballot initiative that could legalize recreational pot in California. Conference organizer Alex Rogers says the size of California's existing medical marijuana industry and the few restrictions on it means it will take some effort to persuade all the relevant players that complete legalization would be a step forward. The state previously defeated another effort to legalize recreational use in 2010. Backers of legalization have until late August to submit a proposed initiative to the Secretary of State and until April of 2016 to gather enough signatures to qualify a measure for the November ballot. The House of Representatives Energy and Commerce Committee has voted in favor of new legislation that would fast-track new controlled substance pharmaceuticals through the DEA. While a drug is required to be approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration in order to be marketed, the DEA must also sign off on drugs subject to the Controlled Substances Act. DEA can take more than a year to schedule a product under the Act, even when the FDA has made specific recommendations regarding the drug scheduling. Under the proposal, DEA would be required to review applications to manufacture a controlled substance in Schedule 3, 4, or 5 for use in a clinical trial within 180 days of receiving the application, and schedule 1 or 2 drugs within 180 days. This has been your 420 Radio News for Friday, February 13th, 2015. I'm Russ Belville.
.420 Radio, fighting prohibition since 2012. The International Cannabis Business Conference is coming to the Hyatt Regency Hotel in San Francisco, California, February 15th and 16th, 2015. Don't miss this exclusive opportunity to hear from the experts on the future of marijuana commerce, including scientists like Dr. Carl Hart, Dr. Amanda Ryman, and Dr. Stanton Peel, policy experts like Ethan Nadelman from Drug Policy Alliance, Anthony Johnson from Oregon's legalization campaign, travel author Rick Steves from Washington's legalization campaign, and California legalization pioneer Dale Sky Jones. Business experts like Harborside Steve D'Angelo, ArcView Group's Troy Dayton, and UFCW union leader Dan Rush. Cannabis journalists like Ricardo Baca, Steve Bloom, and Doug Fine, and California Republican Congressman Dana Rohrabacher, plus many, many more. Tickets are on sale now at internationalcbc.com, but hurry, last year's conference in Portland, Oregon was a sellout. International Cannabis Business Conference, San Francisco, California, February 15th and 16th, internationalcbc.com.
NORMAL stands for Responsible Adult Cannabis Use. If cannabis use is causing problems in your life, consider taking a break or seeking medical assistance. Consider ceasing cannabis use if you have a family history of mental illness. Don't drive or operate heavy machinery while impaired by cannabis use. Cannabis use is not without risks, even though the risks may be far less than those.
With over 1 billion people in the world, chances are there's somebody out there just like you. There are software engineers, pastry chefs, artists, and people with medical conditions. And what do many of these people have in common? They use marijuana. It's expected that marijuana will be legalized in California. And when that happens, what will be the biggest concern? Safety. That's where we come in. High Def Transit is a discreet shuttle service that also serves as a mobile vapor room. Members can medicate on board, while our certified drivers get you to your destination safely, so you can enjoy the ride. So hop in, make friends, and ride safe. High Def Transit.
Welcome back, everyone. 14 and a half after the hour. And today we break the sad news from this week that Ralph Bronner, the 78-year-old executive vice president of Dr. Bronner's Magic Soaps, passed away this week due to a heart attack that he suffered on Tuesday. The statement from the family reads as follows. It is with heavy hearts that we share the news that Ralph Bronner passed away yesterday from complications of a heart attack he suffered over the weekend. Ralph was a beautiful force of nature, bowling over everyone he met. Ralph, along with his late brother Jim and sister-in-law Trudy, took over and shepherded Dr. Bronner's Magic Soaps through a critical period in the 1990s when the company was forced into bankruptcy and Dr. Bronner's health was failing. Under their steady, pragmatic guidance, the company exited bankruptcy on sound financial footing and became a leader in progressive employee and business practices. Ralph was the heart and soul of Dr. Bronner's, who inspired us all to hold true to the mission of spreading love first, making profits second. Ralph loved people, singing songs, telling jokes, and pumping people up on just how great his father's soap and message of peace was. A true man of the people, there wasn't anyone that Uncle Ralph wouldn't approach, and within 5 minutes have them belly laughing and hugging him. He was a spiritual giant, a walking Buddha of love and laughter. At his birthday in early June, close to the anniversary of his brother Jim's passing, we brought our magic foam experience to make a memorable, fun-filled day at Wellspring, an organic farm we support, with lots of kids, laughter, and singing. There was a special energy of love and appreciation in the air from his brother, who created the foam, giving him a big foamy hug from the spirit world. Thank you, Uncle Ralph, for being so awesome. We love you and will miss you sorely. Love in all one, the Bronner family. And, of course, Dr. Bronner's soaps, Dr. Bronner was founded by Emanuel Bronner, who was the father of Ralph Bronner. Ralph was Emanuel's first son. Emanuel Bronner was a survivor of the Holocaust who went on to form his Magic Soaps company. And the company was one of the first mass-marketed, eco-friendly body products. Nowadays you go into a Whole Foods or Trader Joe's, any of these markets, and you can find hemp lotion, hemp oil soaps, all these natural organic products. But back then, back in the 80s and 90s, when that was first coming to the public's consciousness, Dr. Bronner's was there promoting their soaps, promoting an ecological worldview, a view of sustainability. And of course, Dr. Bronner was huge in the world of industrial hemp. His soaps use hemp oil as one of their fattening ingredients there. And the awareness of that led to a conflict with the Drug Enforcement Administration. And Dr. Bronner's soaps was forced to sue the DEA over their banning of hemp products. Many people don't remember that history, that the DEA actually banned hemp soaps, hemp lotions, all under the theory that these things contained minute amounts of THC, and that could lead to failures on drug tests. The company, Dr. Bronner, joined by others, sued the DEA and won their lawsuit. And if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have this hemp industry that we have with hemp products and hemp oils and hemp seeds and so forth. There was a documentary, 2006 documentary, Dr. Bronner's Magic Soapbox. You can find more about Ralph Bronner in that documentary. And Ralph Bronner was really the man who carried on his father's legacy and his message of hope and ecological sustainability. The folks, the website, of course, is drbronner.com. And according to the website, the Bronner family supports Vote Hemp and the Hemp Industries Association for their legal, media, grassroots, and lobbying efforts to re-commercialize industrial hemp in the United States. Dr. Bronner's is also the founding sponsor of Hemp History Week, which is the annual hemp information and education campaign that takes place in May every year since 2010. It's the largest national grassroots marketing and public education effort to renew strong support for hemp farming in the United States. That's something we've always been a part of here at the Russ Belville Show and 420 Radio. Join us in May for our week-long Hemp History Week shows, where we have all sorts of great guests telling us all of the aspects of industrial hemp. And of course, join us every other Wednesday for Hemp Day Hump Day with hemp-bound author Doug Fine. the New York Times best-selling author / goat rancher. And we will continue dedicating a significant portion of our resources to covering the world of industrial hemp. And we are sad to have to note the passing of such an icon in the industrial hemp movement. Ralph Bronner, Executive Vice President, Dr. Bronner Soaps, dead at the age of 78. Rest in peace, sir.
All we want to do is pump you up.
All right, folks, that sound means that it's 4:20 in Denver, Colorado. If you're in the Mountain Time Zone, it's just about time to get your weekend on. If you're in the Central or Eastern Time Zones, you're probably already off work, and hell, you might as well join us for a smoke break. Let's start this weekend off right, shall we? We're right back with Drug War Data Mining after these messages.
.420 Radio, your ticket to the Boston Freedom Rally. Are you in the market for portable vaporizers now? Get online to vapes.buzz, the quick and easy link to portablevaporizers.now.com. Vapes.buzz has everything you are looking for, including vape pens, herbal vaporizers, e-juice, parts, accessories, and more. Visit vapes.buzz and use promo code 420radio to get 10% off your online purchase, or just give them a call at 866-264-2415. Vapes.buzz. Get vaping, baby! Connect with 420radio.org through social media, on Twitter at 420radio.org, and our Facebook page at 420radio.org. Follow us and like us today. You'll be glad you did. Get.buzz. .buzz is the internet platform that fuels community interest, excitement, and new experiences. .buzz is the premier online destination for internet users seeking the latest news on a variety of topics. .buzz appeals to groups active in blogging, communications, journalism, advertising, and marketing. .buzz offers registrants a stronger alternative to the shrinking namespace of existing top-level domain names, such as .com, .net, and .org. Get your name now at get.buzz. Arguing for the end of adult marijuana prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It is even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more in this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
Welcome back, everyone. 22 and a half after the hour. Today in the Drug War Data Mining, we're going to take a look at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and a database of theirs that's known as the Fatality Analysis Reporting System, or FARS. This is the database, if you will, of all the wrecks that take place in the United States. We've got a link that we'll provide in our chat room if folks want to follow along with this. And the nice thing about the FARS data is it provides us information going all the way back to 1994 to give us a picture of how dangerous the roads are in America. Let's switch over to the video screen and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. This is the FARS website, and this top line, well, here's all your years, 2012 through 1994. And then you have your motor vehicle traffic crashes, and this particular bar that indicates the fatal crashes in the United States. And for all of 1994, there were 36,000 fatal crashes. And that number was going up throughout the 90s, 37,000, sticking around 37,000 through the early 2000s. By 2002, it rose into the 38,000s. 38,000, up to 2005, where it peaked at 39,000 traffic fatalities in 1 year in the United States. But check what has happened since 2005. Since 2005, that number has dropped substantially. 2005 was 39,000, 2006, 38, 2007, 37, and 2008 dropped all the way down to 34,000 fewer traffic fatalities. So a drop of 1,000 per year over a 3-year span each year, and then a drop of 3,000 in the span of just 1 year. Now, there are all sorts of reasons that we can point to as to why these changes might happen. cars get safer, the roads get safer. We might have more police that are out doing patrols to keep people from driving so quickly. The price of gas in the mid 2000s went through the roof, and so maybe people are driving less. But another aspect of history that was going on during that time was the rapid expansion of medical marijuana in this country. From 2005 to 2008, you saw many more states adopting medical marijuana. And in those states, we see their fatalities dropping as well. And that has continued since 2008. In 2009, it dropped to 30,000. 2010, it was also at about 30,000. And in 2011, for the first time ever, the fatalities dropped below 30,000 in a year to 29,867. They increased slightly in 2012 by about 1,000 more fatal crashes. But one of the things that needs to be understood as we look at this is that the overall fatalities need to be balanced by how much people are driving. As we scroll down in this particular graph, you will get down to our fatality rates, national fatality rates. This fatality line, fatalities per 100 million vehicle miles traveled, I think is one of the most important stats we've got in this database. It takes into account that people are going to drive more in California, let's say, than they would drive in Rhode Island. Just the size of the state is going to matter. And as we look at this, it's quite interesting because now, balanced out by 100 million vehicle miles traveled, we had 1.73 fatalities. So for every 100 million miles that were traveled in the United States, 1.73 people died in 1994. This is a number that has done nothing but go steadily down. We are down now to 1.13 fatalities per 100 million miles. And this number has been below 1.15 for the past 4 years. What else has been going on in the past 4 years? Why, we've had many more states legalize medical marijuana. We've had many more states decriminalize marijuana. And we've had 2 states legalize recreational marijuana markets. And yet we do not see an associated bump in any sort of traffic fatalities. We see the numbers consistently down if we look at fatalities per 100,000 people, or fatalities per 100,000 vehicles, or fatalities per 100,000 drivers. No matter how you slice it, the fatalities are going down in the United States, even as more and more people are using marijuana. And if you'd like to break this down, in the top right corner, there's a link that will take you to the individual states. And it's very interesting looking at the individual states and seeing how their fatality rates have gone down. And you can pick one state, like let's pick on Colorado for the year 2012 when they first legalized. And that information will pop up for us with a highlight on Colorado showing that they had a slight increase, a 6% increase in fatalities in 2012. In Washington State, the other state that legalized, we see a slight decrease of 2% from 454 to 444. Interesting data, very worth taking a look at.
.420 Radio, freeing your mind 24 hours a day.
Growing plants indoors can be a rewarding hobby, but electricity bills can go through the roof. Then you have to cool down all those big hot lights. It can drive a grower insane. With Lush LED lighting, you can solve many of these issues and double your rewards. Matt and his scientists have developed the perfect light for flowering plants with far less cost and heat. And the results? Very effective. Check out LushLEDlighting.com right now.
The law offices of Omar Figueroa would like to remind you to stand up for your rights. If you are detained or arrested, treat law enforcement with respect and stand up for your rights by repeating, "I respectfully invoke all of my legal and constitutional rights. I do not consent to any search and seizure. I want to remain silent, and I want to speak with my attorney." Please contact the law offices of Omar Figueroa at 415-489-0420 or 707-829-0215 or on the web at omarfigueroa.com.
Activism begins with ACT. The Russ Belville Show features the stories of hardworking grassroots activists working for an end to prohibition in today's activist agenda.
Welcome back, everyone. 30 and a half after the hour. And today in the activist agenda, we're taking a look at the Show Me state of Missouri. Show Me Cannabis is the organization. And joining us on the telephone, we have Aaron Malin from Show Me Cannabis. Is it Malin or Malin?
Malin is the best way to pronounce that.
Malin, Aaron Malin, thank you so much for joining us today. And I got to tell you, for your picture for our webcam, I put up this adorable shot of you in your car with your dog. Tell us just real quickly about your dog.
My dog Huxley, he has a very sad backstory, and we rescued him this summer, and he's been a blast to have around.
Oh, very, very cute. Very, very cute dog. All right. So, Aaron, the reason we have you on the show today has to do with Show Me Cannabis's most recent activism, and it concerns the state drug task forces and their failure to obey the law. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this suit that you guys are going forth with?
Sure. Well, the Show Me State has 27 multi-jurisdictional drug task forces, and they really operate in a very dangerous legal gray area where they're not really overseen by anybody, and yet they have at the same time kind of unprecedented legal authority as agents of the state. And we found in the last year and a half, while really what we were trying to do is just, explain to Missourians what prohibition of marijuana looks like in the status quo, we were trying to gather some basic data and information about what these drug task forces do, who they arrest, etc. And we found in the process of trying to do that none of them, or very few of them, wanted to comply with the state sunshine law. After a year and a half of prodding, several of them still are refusing to comply with the state sunshine law, which is the state's open records law. And so we took several of them to court. 4 lawsuits are currently pending. Wow.
Okay, so first thing that jumped out at me was, how many drug task forces in Missouri?
There are 27 drug task forces.
Lord,
in the state of Missouri.
27. So like,
a few $1 million in funding divided amongst them. And yeah, it's a very concerning situation.
My geographic knowledge of Missouri is not as complete as yours, I'm sure, but let me think. There's St. Louis, there's Columbia, there's Kansas City. I mean, how many places do they need drug task forces in? Are they patrolling every single county or something?
Yeah, every single county, or there's about 108 counties or so in Missouri, and I'd say about 103 of them are under the jurisdiction of one of these multi-jurisdictional drug task forces. So yeah, you've got, drug task forces that cover, 3 rural counties in the middle of the state.
Wow.
And they have a lot of money to do a lot of harm in those situations.
So you guys are suing because they're not following the open records law, the sunshine law. What is it that you were trying to find out about them that they refuse to disclose?
Well, originally we were just trying to figure out, again, what marijuana prohibition looks like in the state of Missouri. So what these drug task forces are doing, how they're serving their search warrants, what they're finding when they serve those search warrants, what the majority of their arrests are made for, what the majority of drugs seized are. And then finally, we were trying to figure out who oversees them, who's actually in charge, and who provides the oversight that a different state law, not the state open records law, but a state law governing these entities, requires. And, in the course of that, this was not supposed to be a year and a half long project. It was meant to be a very short project where we gathered some basic information, painted a picture about what marijuana prohibition looked like in Missouri for voters, and kind of helped to use that to contrast it with our possible legalization. But instead, it's turned into a situation where law enforcement, particularly drug task forces, have perpetually refused to comply with the state open records law, and we have some very serious concerns about why they're not providing the information they're required to provide under law. And there's also a separate legal issue to the open records situation, which is the statute I referenced earlier that governs these multi-jurisdictional entities and requires oversight. Well, it appears as though that statute requires them to form a policy board that oversees the drug task forces, and a number of these drug task forces actually formed that policy board on paper for the purposes of tricking the Department of Public Safety into thinking they were complying with the statute to receive funding, but those oversight boards never actually met, never actually even communicated, and never provided any oversight at all. So we have a number of drug task forces that are essentially overseen by nobody. They're basically rogue agents with blocked funding, and that's very concerning as well. So the primary legal issues are the requirement for oversight and also the refusal to comply with the state open records law.
Yeah, that's quite remarkable. We're speaking with Aaron Malin from the Show Me Cannabis. You can find them at Show Me Cannabis. Is it .org out there?
.com.
Show Me Cannabis. ShowMeCannabis.com. Okay. So, in addition to these drug task forces, okay, well, first of all, they're not replying to your records requests like they should. What's their rationale for withholding this information?
Well, they've had a number of different rationales and different circumstances. In a lot of cases, they just outright lie. I've filed a number of different open records requests with agencies that are very clearly subject to the state open records law, and the response was to tell me that the drug task force did not exist, despite clear evidence to the contrary. In a couple of different cases now, drug task forces have been more or less caught in their own lies and had to backtrack, and we're continuing to pursue cases of that nature. One of them is currently pending against the St. Louis Drug Task Force. So one of the things they do is just pretend not to exist. In other cases, they cite very obscure provisions of law. There's one exception to the state open records law, for example, that allows entities to close certain specific records if those records are related to the prevention of terrorism in the state of Missouri. We had one task force from Southwest Missouri claim that their data about who they arrest for what drugs was going to be involved in preventing terrorism, and thus they couldn't disclose it to me. Really, just anything they could pull out of their back pocket to try to make me go away, I think was what they were willing to throw out. For a long time, I don't think that any of these entities were aware that we were serious and were actually going to call them and press these issues in court when they made up, very silly explanations that wouldn't fly into court of law.
Wow, this is amazing, everything that you're trying to uncover here in Missouri, and we're really proud of you guys for putting this fight up. How can our listeners help you? Do you have a donations page or any way that they can offer their support?
Certainly. So showmecannabis.com/report is where the comprehensive report about all of our drug task force activity is hosted. On that page, there's a link to where you can donate to continue to fund or help to fund this research if you're interested. And those donations also help fund our legal fight as well. So, the three drug task forces and the Narcotics Association that we currently have lawsuits filed against are not the only lawbreakers in the state. And we'd certainly like to continue our legal campaign if we are able to raise the funds. So we'd certainly appreciate any help of the listeners.
All right. Help them out if you can. Now, another story coming out of Missouri that I just wanted to get your comment on is this story of Jeff Mizanski serving life without parole. And the latest we've heard is that your governor, Jay Nixon, is willing to take a look at this case. Can you give us any updates on that and what the prognosis is from the governor?
Well, the governor has had Jeff Mizanski's clemency petition in front of him for about 2 years now, almost 2 years. And he's never commented beyond a very straightforward, dodgy one-sentence reply when asked about the petition, which is, all petitions receive a thorough review. He wouldn't comment on the specifics of it. But once the Missouri legislature, very recently, in fact, the same day he made those comments, announced they were going to consider a bill to free Jeff Mizanski if Governor Nixon didn't grant clemency, Governor Nixon made for the first time very specific comments about Jeff's case and said that, because the law that Jeff had been sentenced under had already been repealed, and because Jeff's sentence was very serious for a nonviolent crime, he was going to give the case a very serious review. And that's really the first time he's ever commented specifically on Jeff's case and hasn't just given us that one-line non-answer. So we're really excited about the prospects for action there. At the same time, the legislature has indicated that they're willing to make something happen if the governor continues to drag his feet. So one way or another, we're really hopeful that Jeff Kaczynski is going to get out. He's been doing life without parole for marijuana for 21 years now, and he has great-grandchildren that he has not had a chance to meet. And we very much hope we'll get that chance.
Yeah, and folks, if you have a way of getting your words to Governor Nixon there in Missouri, I'm sure the governor's got a website that takes comments. Bring this up to him and make sure that he knows that this is a case that has nationwide, in fact, international attention. How many different news agencies have you guys talked to about this case, and how much spread has this word gotten?
Well, I think it's gotten, it's gotten international attention. We know that Jeff's case has been covered in at least 15 or 16 different countries. In terms of U.S. coverage, it's received, I don't even know, hundreds, perhaps thousands of articles in the last several months. The coverage has really just been unbelievable, especially in the last 4 to 6 months, I'd say. We raised $10,000 online to help fund the effort to convince the governor to free Jeff Kaczynski. The response has just really been incredible in the recent months.
The other story that we all caught word of nationwide coming from Missouri, of course, was the protests after the killing of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, the suburb of St. Louis. And Aaron, we're wondering how Show Me Cannabis, or if Show Me Cannabis has done anything to draw the parallel between the way the police are dealing with the African American community and the criminalization of drugs, in particular marijuana. Is that something that has come to play in your activism?
Oh, very much so. We had a conference, our annual conference, just a few months after the Ferguson verdict was announced. And at that conference, the theme was basically the parallels between Ferguson and the war on drugs. And it's really hard to imagine that you get to a scenario where there are, tanks in the streets of Ferguson following those protests without the war on drugs. That militarization of police simply does not happen without the escalation of the drug war that comes in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So, and then the DOD program in the 90s. So all of these things are byproducts of the drug war. We've done as much as we can, I think. Perhaps we could always do more, but to draw attention to those parallels, and the theme of our annual conference following the Ferguson events was the parallels between racial justice issues and the war on drugs. So, yeah, we think there's a really clear parallel there to draw, and we hope that both opportunities provide real chances for reform.
Well, thank you so much for making people aware of that, because I'm glad that's getting out to the public, that they're starting to understand that these aren't isolated issues. They all contribute to one another: mass incarceration, war on drugs, racial justice, and so forth. And I encourage people that are in the marijuana movement to make sure you expand your horizons and understand all these interlocking parts. And no group is doing it better in Missouri than Show Me Cannabis. Check them out at showmecannabis.com. Aaron Malin, thank you so much for joining us on the show, and good luck with all of your lawsuits. We really appreciate you moving forward with that.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right. Stay tuned, folks. We've got the anti-drug public service announcements of the day coming up, and then right after that, time for a radical rant. Yeah, they're going to try to drug test for welfare in at least a dozen states. We'll tell you why that's a lousy idea when we come back.
You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
420 Radio, your ticket to Seattle Hemp Fest. At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Russ Belville Show and 420 Radio. In the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Russ Belville Show presents the anti-drug public service announcement of the day.
About 1 in 11 marijuana users become addicted. That number changes to 1 in 6 if they try the drug before age 18. Marijuana, it's addictive. About 68% of all medically necessary drug treatment admissions for youth aged 12 to 17 are for marijuana. Marijuana, it's harmful to youth. New research shows a permanent drop in IQ when marijuana is used regularly before the age of 18. Marijuana, it lowers intelligence. Marijuana use impairs coordination, balance, perception, motivation, memory, and judgment, which can lead to the risk of injuries and activities in sports. Marijuana, it limits performance. In the U.S., marijuana is the most commonly identified illegal drug in fatal crashes. Marijuana, it impairs driving. Most high school juniors in Oregon don't use marijuana. Marijuana, it's not popular.
This has been the anti-drug public service announcement of the day. To cure this sort of reefer madness, listen to the Russ Belville Show every weekday on 420radio.org. Adam Hand of Handmade Apparel produces quality custom designs for t-shirts, hats, and other apparel. Handmade Apparel is the official design shop for 420 Radio among many clients who rely on Adam Hand for everything from short-run custom projects to full-run clothing lines. Visit handmadeapparel.biz to browse the selection of handmade gear or to get a personal quote for your own designs. Handmade Apparel, a proud supporter of 420radio.org.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant.
Welcome back, everyone. 47 after the hour, and today we're taking a look at a report from the National Commission on State Legislatures, which tells us that there are 12 states out there currently seeking to drug test welfare applicants. That's right. Piss testing for the poor is back with a vengeance in Connecticut, Hawaii, Iowa, Kentucky, Minnesota, Mississippi, Montana, New York, Oregon, South Carolina, Texas, and West Virginia. In fact, West Virginia just advanced their bill in the state Senate on Tuesday. And of course, we've talked about this before in the Radical Rant as to how ridiculous this is. Let me just attack this from a few different angles. Number one, it doesn't really work. The state of Tennessee just recently released the results of its first 6 months of drug testing for welfare. And out of over 16,000 people, only 37 failed a drug test. 37 out of 16,000. And when you consider what the cost is for a drug test, it costs more for these states to implement these procedures than the money they would have saved from not giving out the benefits. And this isn't just Tennessee. This has been found consistently in every state so far that has mandated drug testing for welfare. They find that welfare applicants have a far lower rate of drug test positives than the general public. Now, there's a really good reason for this. Drugs cost money. If you're poor, you don't have the money for drugs. This shibboleth that has been foisted upon us by the reactionary right wing for so long, that there's welfare queens out there and welfare bums that are just using their welfare money to get high, is ridiculous. First of all, the people that are in need of welfare are very often just in temporary need. There are few cases of this intergenerational, lifelong welfare dependency, the kind of welfare queens that the right wing and the conservatives always want to scare you with. For most people, it is a temporary situation. That's why the program's called Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. It's temporary. And that's the welfare that most people think of welfare. There's also food stamps, that's supplemental nutrition assistance program. And there's unemployment insurance, right? Those are also considered to be a type of welfare safety net. But TANF, the temporary assistance, is the one that most people are thinking of when they talk about welfare. Now, there's no such thing as the welfare check anymore. TANF beneficiaries get a card, like a debit card, and money is put onto that debit card for them. Now, at that point, they can use the card just like they would use cash to take care of bills, expenses, purchases, and so forth. Now, the cry from the legislatures in all these states always goes along the lines of, we shouldn't subsidize someone's drug habit. We shouldn't subsidize, as taxpayers, somebody's abuse of dangerous drugs. But that does not explain to me why none of these legislatures are ever proposing alcohol testing for welfare, or cigarette testing for welfare, or triglyceride checks for welfare. You never hear about this, right? Apparently, as taxpayers, it's perfectly okay for us to subsidize someone's alcoholism if they have alcoholism. It's okay for us to subsidize their smoking habit, and it's okay for us to subsidize their junk food lifestyle. But the marijuana, oh no, we've got to make sure they're not using the marijuana. And let's not fool ourselves, folks, as to thinking that we're really stopping people from meth or coke or crank or LSD or whatever else. As we all know, those drugs flush out of someone's system relatively quickly. Marijuana stays in someone's system for quite a long time. The drug most often caught in these drug test situations is marijuana. We are talking about eliminating an entire class of people, marijuana consumers, from the social safety net. That's what this is really all about. It's another form of the culture war. For those who hate marijuana, it's another way for them to keep us down, to keep their thumb on us, to make sure that we remain desperate. So there's not a problem with subsidizing drinkers and smokers and fast food, junkies, but there's somehow a problem with the marijuana. And this goes further when we start to talk about how a lot of the states, Colorado now, they're looking at stopping people from using their TANF cards, their EBT cards at dispensaries or pot shops, right? We got to absolutely make sure they don't spend their money on pot, but they can go to the supermarket and buy all the potato chips they want. And for this to be excused by our legislatures as some sort of cost savings, we know that's not true because, like we said, it usually costs more in the cost of reimbursing the failed drug test or the past drug tests than the money that you would save. They found that in Florida. Cost them much more to implement the program than the money they would have saved from it. But we also have to consider just how effective these programs would be anyway, and why are we doing it in the first place? I posit that it really doesn't have a whole lot to do with people worried about the tax money being misspent. It really has more to do with a moral judgment, this idea that the poor are undeserving, and if we give them any sort of social safety net, they become our property, our chattel, our indentured servants, who we may command to do as we please. Now, it's really easy for people in the public to get behind this. The general public doesn't have much understanding of marijuana consumption. They see it as a vice, They may not think people ought to be locked up for it, but they think it's a bad habit and indulgent and self-centered. And they have a problem with people using their welfare money for that. And a large reason for that sentiment, and I see this in comment boards and tweets all the time whenever this subject comes up. Well, I have to take a drug test for my job. You should have to take a drug test for your welfare. And that, to me, is one of the saddest responses to this entire situation. Your oppression is not solved by oppressing someone weaker than you. It seems funny to me that these people will say, well, gosh, I have to take a drug test, so poor people should have to also. They never stop to consider, wait a minute, why am I forced to take a drug test for my job? They just accept that that's the way it is. Rather than pouring all that energy into making sure everyone gets oppressed, how about pouring that energy into reclaiming the freedoms of everyone to not be drug tested, to reclaim our Fourth Amendment right against unreasonable seizures? How about putting the effort there? And also, you'll get the state legislatures, the politicians who post these bills, oftentimes will say, well, we hear from our business community that they're having trouble finding qualified applicants because nobody can pass the drug test. The idea being, if we drug test for welfare, all those layabout, lazy, unemployed bums on welfare who can't get a job because they keep flunking the piss test, well, they'll stop doing drugs and then they'll be able to get a job because they'll be able to pass the piss test. That's the theory, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you consider the drug test positive rate is far below the public drug test positive rate, right? The people getting welfare are far less likely to fail the drug test than the people who are just applying for jobs. We've seen that year after year. But again, it comes back to this idea of, wait a minute, you're looking at the wrong end of the problem here. You employers that are complaining you can't find enough people to pass the drug test, have you ever considered that maybe the drug test is the problem? Maybe the issue is you're passing up all sorts of wonderfully qualified human beings who would be excellent employees merely because you don't like what they did off hours on the weekend. They chose the wrong relaxant. By God, I sure wish more of my employees or potential employees were drinkers. If only they were all binge drinking on the weekends, I could hire them. But gosh, they smoked a joint last week, so can't hire the guy. Why not think of that and put your efforts there? And I know these employers, they often tell me that, well, we don't want a drug test, but we get this insurance break or we get this. There's always some excuse. There's always some reason. There's always something that affects their bottom line if they don't drug test. So why not put your efforts, employers, into getting bills passed, not to drug test the welfare people, but get a bill passed that changes these drug testing requirements, that changes these insurance requirements or forbids discrimination for these particular situations. It's time for all the people who are complaining about a lack of employable people due to drug testing to start taking a look at the concept of drug testing. That's the problem. Switch this to impairment testing. This was kind of a pipe dream in the 90s when we first started talking about it, but now the technology is quite affordable and easy to use. For baseline electronic impairment testing, you hire someone, they set a baseline on an electronic test, tracks the eye, pupil, hand-eye coordination, that kind of stuff. And then you can test them at any time based on their own baseline, and they will pass or fail that test not based on whether or not they smoked a joint on Friday or got drunk on Saturday, but based on their actual level of impairment. Whether they're impaired from lack of sleep, or emotional distress, or an illness, or a prescription drug, or being drunk, or being stoned. Nobody wants to work in an unsafe workplace. But this drug testing, this piss testing, isn't making a drug-free workplace, and it's not keeping anyone safer, and it's only serving to discriminate against good people who happen to choose a substance safer than alcohol. That's all the time we got for Hour 1. Thanks, folks. I'm Radical Russ. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it.